The myth of the Chinese drop, unveiling an ancient torture technique. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to endure one of the most psychologically tormenting methods of torture in history? Imagine a single drop of water becoming your worst nightmare. Intrigued? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling tale of the Chinese drop torture. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're delving into the fascinating and harrowing history of the Chinese drop torture, a method that's intrigued and horrified people for centuries, often shrouded in myth and mystery. This ancient technique is more than just a gruesome tale. Before we dive into the details, you might be wondering, why did this method become so infamous? And who were its unfortunate victims? Stick around, because by the end of this video, we'll reveal the truth behind this age-old method of torment and why it left such a lasting impression on history. If you're enjoying this deep dive into historical mysteries, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories, and check out our other videos that explore the darker sides of history. The Chinese drop torture, also known as water torture, involves a victim being restrained while water slowly dripped onto their forehead. At first, it might sound innocuous, even trivial, but over time, the repetitive, unpredictable drops can become a form of psychological torment, breaking the victim's will. This technique was said to be used by Chinese and European torturers alike. The true power of this method lies not in physical pain, but in the mental anguish it causes. Victims would often describe the experience as maddening, as the slow, rhythmic drops become unbearable. Contrary to popular belief, there's little evidence to suggest that this form of torture was widely used in ancient China. In fact, much of what we know comes from European accounts, particularly from the 16th and 17th centuries. The myth of the Chinese drop torture seems to have been popularized more by Western storytellers than by Chinese records. So why was this method of torture used? It was primarily aimed at extracting confessions or information from the victims. The psychological torment of the slow, steady dripping of water on one's forehead could drive a person to the brink of insanity, making them more likely to divulge secrets or confess to crimes. Who were the victims of this cruel method? They were often prisoners of war, political dissenters, or anyone who held valuable information that needed to be extracted. The duration of the torture varied, but it could last hours or even days, depending on how long it took to break the victim's spirit. The impact of the Chinese drop torture was profound. It led to severe psychological trauma, with many victims experiencing long-term mental health issues as a result. The sheer terror of the seemingly harmless drops of water transformed into a relentless assault on their sanity. Now let's pause for a moment. Boys and girls, would you prefer to be tortured with the Chinese drop or face the swift end of a guillotine? It's a tough choice, right? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Back to our story. It's fascinating to note that while the Chinese drop torture is often linked to ancient Chinese practices, there's more documentation of similar techniques used in medieval Europe. Some records suggest that variations of water torture were used during the Spanish Inquisition to extract confessions. Historians believe that this method was seen as a way to break the spirit without leaving visible marks, making it a preferred method for inquisitors who wanted to avoid accusations of brutality. The psychological effects, however, were devastating, often leaving victims with lasting trauma. Imagine you're a prisoner during the Spanish Inquisition. Would you rather endure the psychological torment of water torture or the physical agony of being stretched on the rack? Let us know your thoughts. Continuing with our tale, some historians argue that the enduring legend of the Chinese drop torture is more reflective of Western fears and fascination with Eastern methods of punishment than actual historical practices. This myth highlights how stories can evolve and take on a life of their own, often detached from their origins. To further understand the psychological impact, let's delve into the specifics of how the Chinese drop torture works. The victim's restrained so they cannot move, and the water's dripped onto the same spot on the forehead. Over time, the sensation becomes unbearable, leading to extreme anxiety, panic, and eventually mental breakdown. One of the reasons this method is so effective is due to its unpredictability. The victim never knows when the next drop will fall, creating a constant state of anticipation and fear. This unpredictability is what makes the method so psychologically tormenting. Here's a thought-provoking question for you. Do you think you could endure the Chinese drop torture for even an hour, or would the mental strain be too much to bear? Comment below with your thoughts. As we explore further, it's important to recognize the cultural context in which these myths develop. The fascination with torture techniques like the Chinese drop torture often stems from a combination of fear, curiosity, and the human tendency to sensationalize the unknown. This myth, like many others, serves as a reflection of societal anxieties and the darker aspects of human nature. To provide more depth, let's examine a case where water torture was allegedly used. In the late 1800s, a Hungarian man named Ladislaus Magyar claimed to have been subjected to this form of torture. His account describes the torment of the water drops and the eventual breakdown of his mental state. While the accuracy of his account is debated, it adds to the lore surrounding this method. Midway through our story, imagine you're in Ladislaus Magyar's place. Could you endure the relentless drip of water driving you to madness, or would you break under the pressure? Share your thoughts. Moving forward, let's address the skepticism around the existence and use of the Chinese drop torture. Many historians argue that while the method's theoretically plausible, there's scant evidence to support widespread use. Much of what we know comes from anecdotal accounts and folklore rather than documented historical records. This skepticism doesn't diminish the power of the myth. In fact, the lack of concrete evidence makes the story even more intriguing, allowing our imaginations to fill in the gaps. It's a testament to the power of storytelling and how myths can persist through centuries, shaping our understanding of the past. As we near the end of our tale, here's one last question for you. Do you believe in the myth of the Chinese drop torture, or do you think it's purely a product of imagination? Let us know in the comments. As we wrap up, it's important to reflect on why such stories capture our imagination. The myth of the Chinese drop torture is a reminder of the human fascination with the macabre and the psychological. It shows how even the simplest elements, like water, can become instruments of fear. Thank you for joining us on this journey into history's darker corners. We hope you found this story as intriguing as we did. Boys and girls, don't forget to leave some love for the channel with a nice like and subscription. See you in the next episode.